Okay, and I just saw that we are now recording the session, so I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. My name is Arthur Raguette, Executive Vice President and founder or co-founder of Ultria. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us on Friday for our second grouping of our Frankly Friday series. For this Friday and a couple of more on June 12th and June 26th, we will be hosting the same general topic, business case and ROI, focused on the savings realization and revenue increase that people can get from deploying contract management software. A little bit of housekeeping as we go through our session today. This is being recorded, so all of you are on mute. You may use the Q&A tab to ask questions at any time. I may hold them to the end, but we will try to keep the session overall to the same 45 minutes that we've committed to. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, as the case may be. A little bit about me, actually very little, because I like to try to be a little more humble. But I am the Executive Vice President and co-founder of Ultria. My background really is in applied artificial intelligence and applied technology for difficult challenges. Today's session is the first of three, as I mentioned, business case for contract management software, really looking at how to build a good business case. And this will focus on sort of a little bit on hard, but mostly on soft value. And then in 2 weeks, on the 12th, we will touch base on how to further enhance revenue recognition and accelerate time to revenue through contract management, which is a good value prop for many financial folks. And then our third session on the 26th is really going to be one that's almost geared towards making your chief financial officer happy. And this is really for hard dollar or hard yen, hard euro, hard currency savings that's empowered through artificial intelligence powered contract lifecycle. So how do we sort of translate your contract assets into savings and also into revenue? How do you understand your current contract management challenges? Who is suffering the most because of these challenges? And then how can we effectively monetize, as well as, maybe put some time value around the benefits of an AI-powered contract management platform? That's our agenda for today. So sort of helping you understand how to convert your assets into savings and revenue, how to understand some of the gaps and challenges, where to start, where to look, who's impacted the most, how does that matter, and then how do we put some value around the solution set. We'll wrap up with Q&A and a little, as well as a little bit of a promo for the next couple of sessions. I would be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge the things that are going on in the world around us. And on a global side, we're all looking at the coronavirus or COVID-19, and specifically what that means from a contract management perspective. We've promised in the past no fear mongering, and today is absolutely no different. So just sort of touching in terms of what this has done for the practice of contract management, maybe to some degree how it's affected the use and deployment of tools. There was a recent survey by IACCM, the International Association of Contract and Commercial Managers, that noted that 80% of organizations are suffering moderate to severe impacts to their contracts and trading relationships as a direct result of COVID-19. I don't think anybody here is super surprised. We certainly know there are outliers. We're talking to several that are in some ways, shape, or form actually benefiting from the revenue redirection that certain open businesses are the beneficiary of. But by and large, one of the requirements is that, well, business is down, volumes are down, contract execution is slowed, executed contracts are being paused, and whether or not these are all by the letter and term of the contract, or whether they are somewhat more just based on the exigencies of business, means that our practitioners out there need to do a couple of things. They need to get better visibility into terms and key clauses. They need the assisted review process to leverage updated playbooks and guided negotiations around ensuring that anything that they are writing today has sufficient risk mitigation and protection given the uncertainty that's to come. And they need to be able to integrate some of these processes directly into their core business processes to enable the remote workforce to manage against these contracts more effectively. I mean, ultimately, it is about forging successful trading relationships in these rather dynamic times. Some of the things that the IACCM survey saw with respect to areas of concern related to COVID-19 is the percentage of the population looking at things like force majeure clauses in their contracts, almost 2/3. Slightly less than half of the respondents, their main concern was answering management questions about what was in the contract. I think oftentimes this will be, oh, can we pause a contract? Can we perhaps extend some of our obligations when it comes to buying a certain volume of widgets and watsits? And then a little bit less than 1/3 are really looking at how to leverage the contract assets from a change review and amendment process perspective. So interest in contract management, I'm not going to say it's at an all-time high, but it is certainly becoming more and more aware that there's benefit in managing contracts when you have times of increased uncertainty. That doesn't necessarily downplay the value that the contract assets have in running and managing and operating your business. I mean, really, it's the fundamental of a contract. It's simply the memorialization of a relationship between two or more parties. But how can we leverage effective contract management to optimize cost savings or to identify new revenue channels, perhaps? And although there may not be any real doubt about the benefits of deploying a contract platform, a contract lifecycle management solution, given the somewhat reduced budgets or heightened awareness in terms of managing cash flow that today's contemporary chief financial officer and departmental level controllers are sort of living under, how do you make sure that your projects, your initiatives around improving the contracting process, streamlining the contracting process, accelerating contract signing, reducing operational costs, and ultimately leveraging these contract assets to improve your supply chain agility and to get a handle on accurate measurement of your revenue resiliency for your shareholders and your board members? How do we make sure that these projects are funded? And that's really what we're hoping to do through this series of webinars, just to give you some experience or share our experience in what it has taken to get good, solid business cases developed that not just sort of overcome the initial barrier of saying no 3 times, which is, I think, part of the I'm an official controller handbook, but just as importantly, making sure that once these budgets are allocated, that you're able to justify the investment in a contract lifecycle solution because of the savings derived or the revenue gained. So they always say the first part of a journey begins with your first step, or some such poorly paraphrased example. What it really means is you have to define your current as is state so that you know what paths you need to take to your to be state. It's good to map out the current challenges that you may be facing across the different stages and phases of the contract lifecycle. From the base intake process, do you have a standard platform? Do you have a standard process? Can you onboard contracts, whether those are for vendors or sales guys or for employees? Do you have templates and clause libraries that might be useful in authoring? Do you have real-time access to contracts, immediate real views? Can you look at contract history? Can you look at the performance history of the other party to assist you in negotiations? Do you have internal workflows that are visible and help you meet the deadlines of the day? And can you get these contracts signed? Are you enabled? Have you embraced electronic signature? Is an electronic signature solution integral to your contract process? And this is really just the first part of the battle. And I might argue not even half of the battle. It's not just about getting contracts signed quickly. Yes, there's some great value there, but it's also being able to manage the ongoing value of that contract. I mean, if I took 2 weeks out of a 3-month signing process, that's great. But if that contract runs for 5 years, isn't it really about making sure that you got your negotiated discounts for the next 60 months? Or that you're able to leverage revenue upsell for your key customers every quarter? That's what we talk about when we look at obligations and entitlements and being able to manage to those. That's really about converting the contract to an operational asset. So it's a good opportunity to see if that's something that can be done. It also helps raise the importance of the contract team, your contracting center of excellence, your legal operations team, however you happen to be structured. And now going beyond these entitlements and obligations, are you also now getting the appropriate regulatory, industry, or company compliance measures that you expect? Because really, penalty avoidance is a good measure of risk. And last but not least, managing expiry and renewals, making sure that you have sufficient time, advance warning, and notification prior to entering into a negotiation cycle for a renewal, rather than having to be rather reactive and signing whatever is put in front of you. So where's the impact when certain things are not in place? Let's just take a couple of user scenarios. Let's take Alice. Perhaps she's counsel, and she's spending almost 3 days a week working on contracts. Well, does she really want to spend her time writing scratch NDAs? Of course not. She's looking for a way for her to know what the GC's approved and how to leverage that as a baseline every time. Or let's take Emma, someone in sales operations, who generates 10 to 12 contracts every week, and she's doing it basically by hand. As she's doing these effectively by hand, she's sending them in for legal review, and sometimes they're not coming back out, and maybe she's hard pressed to understand where they are. Or let's say the GC, who's overseeing many different workflows and work streams across multiple people, companies, divisions, and teams, he's realizing how much time is wasted for all of that talent that he's brought on board that are simply trying to figure out which versions of which documents are the most current. They're fighting versionitis every day. Or we can look at folks who are sort of adjacent to the contracting process. Let's say John, the HR director, who's sending employment agreements out to new hires. He's got key metrics for bringing people online because it's together to reach the candidate, and Lord knows how much longer it is taking those candidates to sign them. Or how is the chief financial officer who may be preparing for a merger and acquisition, how hard is it for him to understand what consistencies might show up during a due diligence because he doesn't have accurate contract analytics? So while the 8 or 9 stages and phases that we had stepped through previously may be just a small indication of where there are solution gaps, how this impacts your internal stakeholders, as well as those stakeholders who too are external to your team, but very important to the organization or impacted, is a lot larger than you may expect. So in order to sort of put together the beginnings of a business case, we need to really start with the numbers. How many different kinds of contracts do you currently have? We often think of things like, well, we have sell-side contracts, or I have partner agreements, or I've got buy-side contracts for goods and services, or maybe direct goods and indirect goods. But there are a lot of other things that are effectively contracts. Even if you're not in a geography where employees sign employment contracts, you may have things like confidentiality agreements, or the agreement of the employee to abide by ethical business practice, or equal opportunity hiring practice. All of these are effectively agreements between two parties. It should be part of a contract platform. So if you add to that your non-disclosure agreements that every vendor and probably half your prospects sign, the quantity of contracts managed in a year can get pretty large. So take the different kinds of contracts that you have, add them up. We know what kind of quantity you have. And then what's the average value of a contract? And you want to be able to measure this by, let's say, contract type. Take the big categories: customer contracts and vendor contracts. Understanding what the value is important when we look at how improving your contract signing process can make a material difference to your bottom line. In sales, your top line; in procurement, your bottom line. That also lets you figure out what the value of all contracts managed in a year is. In fact, these are just good numbers for any center of excellence or legal operations team to have, really. And then when it comes to improving the process of getting contracts signed, we want to be able to understand the average life cycle length from the initial intake request to execution. And you may want to go a little bit farther and figure out how long your contracts actually live in a post-execution world. Finally, what is the average contract failure rate? And what is the financial impact? So this could be for both your sell-side agreements as well as your buy-side agreements. Lack of revenue or loss of revenue can be just as painful as additional overpayments or penalties as it relates to vendors. So as we're gathering our numbers, we're putting our spreadsheets together, and we're trying to look like controllers, we should probably remember that there are different kinds of benefit buckets, for lack of a better term, for artificial intelligence powered contract platforms. You've got the non-financial benefits: increased compliance, process efficiency. And then you've got financial benefits, which can be labor savings due to process efficiency, as well as expanded value, either increased savings or increased revenue. Let's take a look at some of the non-financial benefits. So using AI and machine learning tools to assist contract evaluation and drafting can save time and effort, making contracts more compliant and embedding less risk. So this could be simply by using pre-configured automated review workflows, having your CLM do first-level cuts to understand whether contracts meet your minimum requirements, and using thresholds to set triggers and notification to bring the right people in, using data from those contracts to drive better internal compliance to procedures. This contract has a value greater than $10 million. This contract is greater than $10 million and covers South America. This is greater than 10 million, covers South America, and is related to partners. That means this should be the compliance checklist for that particular agreement. Being able to use that information to then also run the right risk model against that contract to route for compliance check and provide input to your comprehensive risk tools is also a benefit of using artificial intelligence for your analytics. And then, of course, using that same capability to run ongoing monitoring in that day one, day two state of your contract after they've been executed, leveraging the power of expected milestones that are pre-configured and tracking key performance metrics for either the customer or the supplier. Being able to provide real-time visibility throughout the process, both in the pre-sign and post-sign, is really an overall benefit to ensuring compliance. A recent KPMG survey of outsourcing suppliers, these are those sort of LPO and equivalent kind of firms, found that without close contract governance, businesses could stand to lose up to 40% of the contract value. Now, if we look at efficiency, there are a couple of features within, I'll say, contemporary CLM, specifically the Ultria AI-powered CLM, that provides operational efficiency throughout the process. Having an integrated connection to Microsoft Word to bring in templates and clause and guided authoring information, to provide standardized contract templates that have been pre-approved with alternate template frameworks available through both the browser and through your authoring environment like Microsoft Word, having pre-approved contract clause libraries with alternates and the ability to provide guided suggestions. This is leveraging your playbooks today and a very straightforward thing to populate. And then how do you take in third-party contract paper? To be able to take third-party paper in, disassemble it, extract metadata, and understand risky clauses. To provide automated workflows to enable fast-track reviews and increased accountability, as well as maintaining version control and audit history throughout the review and approval process. Now, some of those core benefits, right? The ability to request contracts through multiple modalities, to use a very fancy term. But I can do this through Microsoft Outlook. I can do it through email. I can do it through a portal. I can do it through my existing customer relationship management platforms. I can bring it in through existing supplier relationship platforms. Use robotic process automation to generate best first draft. Leverage these workflows with version control for accelerated review cycles, and we've seen reductions of 20 to 30% in that cycle. Provide a collaborative CLM platform for in-house review, both serial and parallel reviews, and integrated e-signatures. Now, there are some financial benefits, and this helps monetize this part of the business case. Labor savings is a key one. And we're going to get into some math here, so I'm going to choose my words very deliberately. So, the financial benefits tied to labor savings and expanded value of contracts, whether it be expanded savings or expanded revenue. And by the way, in our sort of downstream second and third sessions, we'll go much deeper into expanded revenue and expanded savings. So here we're going to sort of focus on the labor side of things. By estimating the associated average loaded cost, that's a mouthful, I'll describe that in a minute, organizations can look at reallocating team resources. That could be budget or that could be people. And that is much likely to be preferred, especially in uncertain times, as compared to simply reducing staff, right? So the numbers that we're going to go through are not about letting people go. It's about using them to better effect and moving things around in the budget bucket. For US-based team members, an average loaded cost should be between 1.8 and 2.2 times the annual salary. Now, average loaded cost, the loaded is in quotes, right, really refers to the cost of that individual's salary plus the cost of their benefits plus the cost of any contributory or direct pay taxes. They give percentage of state unemployment, disability, and or social security taxes, right? and a percentage of the overhead associated with them being physically someplace. Percentage of rent, furniture, part of the IT budget, part of finance, G&A, all of that rolls up to anywhere between 1.8 and 2.2. It'll vary from business to business. If you've got actual numbers, it's great, use them. And then if we're looking to do some math based on, figuring out how many hours somebody puts in and what those cost of hours related to contracts are, you can take that loaded number and just to make the math easy, divide by 2,000, number of working hours per year. That's assuming a 40-hour work week, 50 hours at the desk, feels like 2,000. There are certain organizations that yell at me and tell me the real number is 1,932. You're absolutely good. You can use that. There are others that have probably a higher rate, but let's just use 2,000 for, as they say, close enough for government work. And then there are some other things, the cost of recruiting, training, and mentoring new employees, which could simply be much more than a budget reallocation. So hold that number in abeyance or on the side. That's really there to help you justify keeping your team and simply moving them into more productive roles. So let's just take a typical case study. I'm going to grab Acme Roller Skates Company. Now, I did this recently for someone, and I got a ping on a chat saying, is this like the Wile E. Coyote? So for those of you listening in from the United States today, if they were rocket-powered roller skates, yes, this could very well be a coyote-friendly company. But let's just take Acme in isolation. Let's say we've got a mythical team made up of 4 core labor categories: attorneys, non-attorney legal professionals, sales execs, and administrative and support team. For each of these labor categories, we've got team number counts or team member counts. So we've got 10 attorneys, 20 non-legal, 10 attorneys, easy for me to say, 20 non-attorney legal professionals, contract professionals, 50 heads down sales reps, and 10 support staff. We can see the number of hours per week that they spend on contract management, contract authoring, or contract execution. And here we have a list of their responsibilities. So remember back when we sort of started this, we said here are the 8 or 9 stages and phases of the contract life cycle within an organization. This is where we start to map people to roles. And the reason we do this is as we do a more detailed analysis, we'll see where an AI-powered CLM is going to drive costs out of your operations. So attorneys generally focused on contract review, maybe negotiation, right? Non-attorneys, these could be folks who are running ongoing contract management. Some degree, though, you may also find them to be actively in the contract negotiation and review stage. You've got sales guys doing the smooth sales process. Got to remind my marketing people to look at that. And support staff. So these are teams supporting sales. So sales operations, legal operations, perhaps parts of finance, and just actual corporate ops. We've got average loaded costs, right? $220 an hour, $120 an hour. And I've got some annual numbers for sales and support staff. Remember, we take those numbers, multiply them by 1.8 or 2.2. Basically, you can double them and then divide by 2,000 to get your average hourly rates. Now, the math gets a little bit deep here. So let's take a look at both the pre-award and post-award cycle around contract management. And what percentage of time by task goes into that process. So contract intake, 30% of the time, 25% of the time, contract authoring, 35%. And then how is that spread out across these labor categories? The math gets pretty deep. The interesting part for us, I think, and for all of us, is what is the improvement that contract lifecycle management brings to these individual tasks and how they apply from a percentage of time against the labor rates. And also, what is the incremental gain when we start applying artificial intelligence on top of contract lifecycle? And that varies based on the contract stage. It averages to be approximately 5%, but it'll run anywhere from 3 to 6. Once we understand what the percentage of improvement is against the amount of time and the labor costs, we can start to run some basic math. So depending on usage of artificial intelligence for both analytics and the intake process, in our sort of sample, we see that the first year manpower savings range from 22 to 27%. And given the costs of our team here at Acme Roller Skates, this could result in a 3-year net present value of just a hair over $4.2 million. Now, when we look at labor savings and this greater efficiency, we're looking at the ability to reallocate or reassign or re-engage team members. So here we're looking at reducing the use perhaps of outside service providers, providing more time to our current team to take care of those things that might have been going outside. That is hard savings and a great thing. You can also redeploy your contract managers and your commodity or product familiar attorneys into working on revenue resiliency efforts, making sure you're getting what you are due from your existing customers, as well as reinforcing supply chain agility, making sure that you are not paying for things that you're not getting, or that, and I know that sounds like an oddball, but that is something that we've seen during COVID. Regular monthly invoices are great, but if your service provider can't get into closed facilities, he's sending you invoices and not delivering a darn thing. So these are some of the easy sort of low-hanging fruit items. As you look at your internal numbers and savings, it's also worthwhile to look at what the external equivalents might have been. So if I'm using inside people and I've reallocated them to tasks that used to go outside, this is opportunity cost savings in its truest and most mathematically verifiable form. We do have a cost savings calculator. In fact, there's a link on our website that you can click on and come visit, and we can help you populate and walk through this. But for all of the nice graphs and bars, all of our math is also exposed, and we're absolutely happy to work with you to put that together. There are also financial benefits tied to expansion. So we say expansion, really what we're talking about is the ability to get more with same, right? So if we're looking at a payback rate conservatively at about 200% payback within 1 year, or an ROI that is a 200% turn, what we're seeing is that legal team will spend about 20% less time managing contracts with an AI-powered CLM. Now, one way to look at that is the team could be able to handle 25% more contracts per year, which is great if you've got more contracts, right? If your sales team is busy getting more business. Again, in a bear market, you have to be sensitive to that. What it does mean, though, is that 20% of your contracts will close faster. So if I can handle 25% more contracts, and or I can close my contracts 20% faster, that means my time to value, whether it is increased revenue or increased savings, will be greater. Remember some of our earlier math questions. We were looking for the average revenue or the average value of a contract. If you know what those numbers are, expansion is one of the best monetized values. So by being able to reduce my days sales outstanding, by gaining time in my close cycle, I may be able to gain hard dollar savings or net new revenue. One of our customers had realized that their average contributory profit, not revenue, but profit per contract per day was $125,000. Okay, that's a good number. But if we think about how many contracts they ran as well as how many days we were able to shorten the cycle. By using our CLM, they were able to reduce, on average, their close cycle by 7 days. 125,000 times 7 is just about $1 million. Again, close enough for government work. That's a good number. On average, they ran 1,200 contracts a year. That's a great number. That's the difference between a nice business case and a great business case. Please, we do offer our cost savings calculator. It's a very straightforward tool, but it'd be great to sort of guide people through it. Feel free to reach out to info@ultria.com, and one of our team members will be happy to respond and get you connected with someone to walk you through our cost savings and ROI calculations. Let me do just a very quick overview for those of you who are not familiar with Ultria. Ultria is all about artificial intelligence powered CLM solutions. And across the board, we're leveraging AI, whether it's to grab metadata information through contract repository loads, whether it's to enable more rapid authoring by both robotic process automation for intake, or to use AI to extract metadata and disassemble third-party content, or it's in the run phase of your contracts after they've been executed, using artificial intelligence for identifying clauses and changes in compliance and rules and regs, or whether it's using the Orbit AI artificial intelligence engine for contract analytics against our repository or any document repository or enterprise content management system you might have. Orbit is available in 3 flavors: Orbit Guide, which assists in the intake process and can be used with our CLM or without; Orbit Explorer, which is used to mine and understand contract analytics, great for identifying risks; and Orbit Protector, which is a turnkey service that we offer for those accounts or customers that have immediate needs to find intent within their contracts, such as, do I have a pandemic clause in my clause majeure section, or what is my governance or risk, or hey, are we tied to LIBOR, and what do we need to do about those kinds of things? Perhaps we can take a couple of minutes and touch on some of the questions that have come in. This one is I think, interesting, I guess. Where does the 1.8 to 2.2 loaded number come from when I'm trying to estimate an employee's cost? Understanding employee overhead numbers is something that has been probably very popular in the professional services industry sector for as long as professional services has been around. We've also seen it for job cost accounting. So this is a very standard model that most controllers and CFOs are comfortable with. The specific numbers are driven from the percentages or the fixed cost per employee of physical overhead, organizational overhead, what oftentimes would just be called G&A, general and administrative, in addition to those costs associated with the employee in terms of contributory taxes, benefits, and insurance. Larger companies will have a somewhat lower overhead number, and that could be as low as 1.2 or 1.3. Rarely is it less than that. And smaller companies could have overhead that approaches 2.5. So we've used 1.8 to 2.2 because it simply hits the bell curve of the Fortune 1000 to Fortune 50 firms that we typically cater to. The taking of that number and then dividing by 2,000 to give you an hourly rate when you have someone's hourly salary is a fairly decent number. If you don't have anyone who takes vacation, you can take that up to 2080. You could drop it down to 1930 if you're running, 4 weeks of vacation holiday and you want to be super, super accurate. Another question I think that just came out, and it's an interesting one, which is, can you monetize the savings realization? We've talked about a simple savings realization model here, and I think I used an example before of revenue. If you negotiate a contract for something that you have bought in the past and you've negotiated a better value, let's say 5% reduction in cost, the sooner you can put that contract into effect and then buy down against it means you've increased your contributory savings. If this is a raw material and you normally spend $100 million for, I don't know, aluminum ingot, and you have been able to hedge that to reduce the average cost by 5%, and you've accelerated your contract savings by 30 days, what that means is 1/12 of your $1 million. I should have picked an easier, 100 million. I should have picked a better number. That feels like 800,000, I guess. 8 million, 80 million, 80 million. So of that $80 million, you've now saved 10%. So you've saved $8 million additional by getting your contract signed a month earlier. $8 million hard dollar savings. We'll have I think our second session, our third session, June 26th, we'll go into cost savings in even more detail. I'm getting that signal from the back of the room virtually that we are just about out of time. So I would again like to thank everyone for taking their time this morning or this afternoon or this evening, as the case may be, and joining us. Hope this has proved worthwhile, or at least given you something to think about. I'm more than happy to share at a more relaxed pace our successes in helping customers create business cases that not just stand the test of time, but also stand the test of those very exacting controllers and chief financial officers. As a reminder, we'll be having another session in 2 weeks on June 12th. This will be focused on the return on investment of a contract lifecycle solution valued by a revenue. And then our third and final for this particular Factory Friday session on June 26th, cost savings, how to leverage AI-powered CLM. This will be, again, a very mathematical or very experiential session. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining. Have a great weekend ahead. Bye-bye.